This week on Center City Overtime, we talk all things strong men, what it means to live like a strong man in 2024, and how to align yourself with the power of God. This is what you don't want to miss. Make sure you subscribe, like, share it with a man in your life. Let's get it.
Welcome to Center City Overtime, a weekly podcast where we take a little more time to dive into Sunday's message. And even though this is not Overtime Live anymore, we just couldn't go back to just Pastor John and me this week. So I'm so excited because one of the benefits actually of not doing this on a Wednesday night is that we have Pastor Joey in the house. Yeah. You can say hey to everybody.
What's up, guys? It's good to see you.
Yeah, there you go. I love your energy. Like, it's such a good family life pastor energy. Joining us today, and we've also got Dom back up here.
What up?
And appreciate Dom's presence because this means he's not live switching the cameras. So Dom's going to do a lot of work behind the scenes.
We'll make it
after
work.
being up on the couch today.
I'm
I'm
glad
really
it's you
excited.
and not me.
I bet you are.
I feel like you're very good at appreciating Dom. I feel like we hear at least once a day, like, I'm so glad Dom's here doing all of this.
Because y'all didn't know. You didn't know the pain. Dom knows it.
I just remember during COVID when Pastor John got carpal tunnel because of how many different videos you were editing. We're glad for a new season.
Yeah, me and Jess were commiserating over that the other day because somebody was like, you're about to walk into a really busy season. What do you feel about that? I'm like, you don't remember COVID like I remember COVID. There was nothing like that season for me personally. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even break a rule to leave my house. So you had to drive from Concord down to Charlotte just to pick up the camera that I recorded my part on. You should have just told me to get over it, but
Crazy
whatever.
time.
Crazy time. That's not why we're here today, but we'll go down memory lane as we go. We started a new series on Sunday, and it's called Stronger. And before we get into the specifics of strong men, which I'm really excited to talk about, I just wondered if you, Pastor John, would share a little bit about where this came from and kind of what you're hoping we all get out of this series.
I was driving in my car, and I don't know what possessed the radio station, but they went through just a whole season, a whole hour and a half worth of pop songs called Stronger, and I just really was inspired by Britney Spears and Aguilera and all, Katy Perry.
I was really buying this.
I know, I was going with this until you started bringing up hip hop songs.
Yeah.
No, so much of this was kind of birthed out of my, first of all, we believe in calendars here, right? We believe that God works through planning. So every season we take a look at the season and consider what it looks like to spend some time communicating through God's plan for families. So within the scope of, right, as we're getting ready for graduations, as Mother's Day just happened, Father's Day just happened, or will happen.
Coming.
Yeah. This is just a great season to reevaluate, just kind of spending some time, energy, and focus. So we do believe that God works within the planning cycle of our calendar, but specifically strong, just because I'm hearing so many people, including myself. So I don't want to make this sound like, but I think for a lot of us, weakness seems to be the mode that we live in. You ask the average person, how you doing? And you're getting a lot of, I'm tired. Mm-hmm. We're getting a lot of, I'm weak. I'm not sleeping well. I don't feel like I have energy. So it really did compel me to a point of prayer and study to think, what does it mean to live in this place of strength? What does strength look like scripturally? What are we called to, and how are we called to live? So many times we talk about hope for the broken and purpose for everyone. Even that idea of hope has this theme of confidence in it, and just the average person doesn't seem to be living in that place of confidence or strength. So that's kind of what birthed some of this thought, and through prayer is kind of how we arrived where we did.
I love that. I'm going to follow up on some of the stuff you said a little bit down the road, but I'm so interested in this contrast between strength and weakness, because really what you taught from this passage in 2 Corinthians is that there is a lot of strength in weakness. So if you had to just kind of quickly summarize what you mean by strength when we get into this conversation about strong men, how would you summarize what that is?
So in 2 Corinthians, where this conversation comes from, we see the solution to weakness according to Paul's conversation with Christ, where he says, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness." So the concept around and the origins of that word, we feel what we see is the potential to exert force in performing some function. So when I'm talking about strength, I'm just talking really about what's necessary to move us forward. We had a series called Anchored, which I really loved. And a part of that conversation was, what does it look like to take strong, intentional steps? So when I talk about strength and power, I'm talking about living the type of life of intentionality and confidence where I'm moving forward and there's just an intention behind it versus waiting for life to happen to me. I'm exerting force and moving forward and watching life happen out of that strength that I find in my relationship with the Lord.
That's awesome. So this question is for everyone. Before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of the message, I wondered about strong men in your life. Like, who's someone that you think of when you hear this idea of strength coming from this biblical place that you would say has been a strong man in your life?
Yeah, I mean, for the first name that comes to mind is this guy by the name of John Caskey. He's I was in his youth group, like his youth small group, when I was in youth group, and he wasn't necessarily the typical strongest guy. He was a goofball. He would wear crazy things at camp. Like he was just one of those guys that you wouldn't, not very typical that you would go to, but he was just a consistent voice of positivity in my life during that season that was really tough, that really for me kind of changed a lot of my issues and helped me through some really hard times. And it wasn't even like he was doing it because he just did it because he cared in a way that I didn't really experience a lot of other men show. So it was just, that's the first name that comes to my mind, and I owe him a lot of things, and I'm grateful that he was part of my journey in youth group.
That's cool. If you happen to be watching, shout out.
What's up,
Did you
John?
call him Pastor John too?
No,
just John.
No, he was just a youth leader too.
Everyone's named John. It's cool.
It's crazy. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just so you would say kind of some of how that strength was demonstrated was that consistent.
Very consistent. Like he would have me over his house to work on projects. He would have me at the youth group just doing different projects here and there, working with my hands. Just very consistent voice. Very just always asking me how things were, even up to my marriage and into my wedding. Like he was just a very consistent, very steady voice that I could always go to. I know it wouldn't really waver much.
Cool. That's awesome. What about you guys?
Definitely my dad, I'd say. That was the first name that came to mind. Another John. Just a common name, I guess. But
It's a common name for strong people.
for sure. But I grew up around a lot of people that weren't blessed with fathers, and so I didn't always hear my dad's the strongest person in my life. And so it was definitely a privilege of mine to be able to say I do have a dad and that he has a strong voice in my life, especially in seasons where I've just struggled mentally or just had struggles just spiritually, just battling with thoughts and things. My dad's always been just a constant voice in my life, someone I can go to in weakness. And he's just always been there for me and been that voice that I just want to go to in times when I'm feeling weak and someone I look up to.
That's cool. I feel like there's this theme of kind of consistency in relationship coming through. That's awesome. What about you, John?
Yeah, I mean, I go to the defaults like my dad, who, if you're part of our community, you've heard about ad nauseum. I feel like every illustration's about
We
him.
also
My
get
dad
to
and
know
my
him.
mom, yeah.
We
And
don't
he's
just hear
here.
about him.
Yeah.
If you've been in this building, he's probably painted one of the walls that you've seen.
Yeah,
For sure.
And he's definitely prayed over
Yeah.
every wall in this place.
Absolutely.
They're part of the prayer team and love it. My brother Ray is also a mark of strength in our lives. And my sister, who was on the couch last week, actually talked a little bit about how my brother Ray was involved in her coming back to the Lord. For me, he was very involved in my discipleship process, just refused to let me dangle out in the wind, was quick to be like, hey, I heard you had this experience with the Lord. You're going to start coming to church with me. I'm going to start bringing you to youth group. And so much of my journey is because of that. But I can go down the list. I've been blessed. I say it all the time. It's almost as if God knew I would need it. So he placed these pillars in my life that just for every season. For a season, it was Billy Cole, and then it was Max Sheary, and then it was Rick Ross. And for so much of that just that establishing of who I am, that foundational work, I think to your point, we often find strength in consistency. We admire these feats of strength, but feats of strength are fleeting. Consistency in relationship is where we can trust the strength of those around us. And I would argue, even to this day, there's strength I have found in men who are friends and not mentors, right? Kanata, Lewis, my best friend Kevin. I have some men in the area from a different place. Tyson Coughlin, who's a part of our overseer board. Mike Fields, part of our overseers team. Kevin Whitten, part of our overseers team, who I can trust in some of their words. So I admire their strength also. It is challenging because I do think that strength tends to intimidate some men. And when they find that consistency and strength, they kind of pull away from it, which is, I think, a ploy of the enemy to keep people isolated.
Yeah. I'm going to share one for me too, because, it's one of the few questions that I can actually answer of what we're going to talk about today. But when I was thinking about this, absolutely my dad came to mind. But the person that I want to share about the most is my grandpa. And a lot of that, he's not the person who would immediately pop into your head when you think of a strong man, but he loved his wife for over 50 years. And at the end of my grandma's life, she had so many health problems. She was bedbound. She was paralyzed from the shoulders down. And he treated her with so much dignity and compassion day in and day out. But joyful the whole time. The man was always whistling or singing or talking about this app that he found that he could see what kind of plant it was outside the window. And so that strength in just choosing that I have a hard season or a hard life in front of me, but I'm going to find joy in the Lord and be consistent in that. Just as I was kind of praying and listening to you yesterday, I thought, what an honor to have a legacy and a privilege to have had not just parents who love the Lord, but grandparents demonstrating that too. So one of the things that I just find that I can kind of understand, because a lot of what you preached about is universal. There was plenty that I could take away and apply, but there is this tension of what culture says it is to be a strong man and what biblical teaching and what we looked at from Samson yesterday says. And so I just wondered to any of you, what are some of those tensions that you feel and this is what culture is saying, and yet this is what it actually means to be strong in the Lord as you just try to live that relationship with God out? Just a light, easy question.
Nah. I think that I always feel like I just need to take on everything myself. It just needs to be with my strength. And if I ask for help from anybody, it's come on, dude, you should be able to do this.
You failed.
Yeah, if I got a call for help, then I'm the one that's weak and can't do it. I think of that even a household. If you got a family, there are times just the household isn't where it needs to be, and if you need advice from someone, it's I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah.
You just kind of feel like you can't call out to anybody because it just shows that weakness. And
no, that was kind of going to be what I was going to lean towards. In my high school life, I tried to take it all on and do it and answer those questions by myself. And I think one of those moments when I was with the man that was just super like a John Cass, his name was Joseph Sullivan, and he showed me and he was there for me, but he did it in a way that was not showing that I was weak, but showing that I was strong, going to him for help. He was very open to say, listen, we all struggle, we all have issues, we all have problems. What is important is that you take those and you find someone that can help you through it. And I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, you know what? We all do struggle. There's no one that can do it themselves. And I think that idea of doing it yourself is so just toxic and doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
I think I'm on the other end of the spectrum to some degree. I don't know if it was just my upbringing. I've been wired to grab at help around me. Maybe there's been some seasons where that's been a fault, but 90% of my life has been who's around me that I can grab a hold of. I will say on the flip side of that, and I think this is a cultural issue too, there's sometimes that I feel like I have to apologize when exerting power. Specifically if I believe that power comes from the Lord. All things draped in love. I'm right in the middle of 1 Corinthians where he talks about all the gifts, and P.S. they're worthless if there's no love, right? So all things draped in love. But when it becomes about the power of God in and through you as a conduit, I do think that in 2024 there is this propensity to like be careful not to, and then you end up feeling like you have to apologize whenever you're living in the fullness of the giftings and the power that God has placed within you, specifically in leadership roles. Like, you know, I feel like it's almost like you have to apologize for leaving your home, leading your home, and apologize for being a leader in the business place.
Or so overqualifying any statement before you make it.
Yeah.
That I think that that's a pressure that's on guys now. Like they, like almost like I got to hide this power that the Lord is working through me. And I think that could be dangerous too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's so much of, I laugh because every time we talk, we eventually come down to so much of this is about discernment and being in communion with the Lord all the time, because that can come from people mismanaging power, but then it can be interpreted as like I need to shy away from what God has equipped and called me to. How do you navigate that tension? And I'm going to lean into you a little bit, Joey, as a new dad of a daughter.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that there's been some change in the way that you kind of think and see the world over the last year.
Yeah, it's I was talking to Emma the other day about it. It was funny because for so long, like just me and Emma, we're like worrying about ourselves. We just go out, like we could go get a lunch or we could go do a dinner and not have to worry about it. But now, like having a child, and it just, you have to reframe everything. And I've worked with kids, I've been around kids, but I guess when I have that responsibility, like now, not only do we have to worry about what she's eating, we have to worry about what toys she gets, we have to worry about how she's growing, we have to worry about how she sleeps. Like it's just this newfound responsibility that takes over is added to like just this life that was great, but now it's even better. But trying to figure out how to make sure that she has all these things, and it's just this tension that I'm relying a lot on Emma because she's taking a lot of that responsibility. And I was talking to her. I was like, hey, is it like I know I'm supposed to be leaving the house, but I need your help in this. And I was a little sad because at points I was like, should I be like, I don't know. I was scared that when I was asking her, I was showing my weakness. And I think we came to this understanding that like we're both in this as one under God, and like there's that relationship. I don't know if that answers your question, but it was funny. Just this idea that like now it's not just me and Emma, but it's one, and it's not just man or and woman, but it's this combined group with God trying to raise this child to be strong and grow to what she's been called to do. Yeah.
Shout outs Dewey. Dewey, you probably should be taking a nap. Stop watching YouTube.
She's on a walk right now.
2 kids.
She ain't sleeping.
John, you and Jess being a little bit further down that role, how have you navigated this idea of strength as a husband and as a parent now to teenagers?
Yeah, it's challenging because again, what I don't want to do is diminish my wife's
Right.
Ability to sit within the constructs of the power of God working in through her life. So I think that there's a false dichotomy that's been created that only one can be strong, which is foolish. It's just foolish. So where we have found our sweet spot is figuring out how we're uniquely gifted and allowing the power of God to funnel through those areas and in order to be a conduit for each other and then for our boys. We are far from the revelation that this is, like from Joey's season of, oh my gosh, what do I do? We are now kind of on the end of, now I'm starting to get petrified because P.S. it doesn't change, just the fears get exchanged.
That sounds good. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. That's
Super
like,
excited.
yeah, that's like the one time I was expressing a fear at as when they were younger, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like afraid that I'm going to drop them or do something like that. And they're like, well, it just gets worse when they leave the house. I'm like, what? Yeah, when they're 18, 19, you don't even see them and you're worried about everything. I'm like, wait, what? But now I'm at the point where I'm obsessed with this idea, like, how do I build strong men? They're very much in that teenage phase. Like I was in that teenage phase, like everyone in this seat would be in a teenage phase, and they have strengths already. They're nowhere close to where they're gonna be. And now I just got to figure out how to to the point, we talk about this every week. Like, I'm always being convicted by every message I'm writing. But how do I make sure that I'm a conduit of the power and the Spirit of God, so they know the difference between their strength and then what happens when we rely on His strength? So that's kind of my relationship with strength and power right now within the scope of my family.
Yeah. I love that you brought up that idea of conduit, because you preached yesterday the difference between a container and a conduit. And I got to be honest, usually I can kind of figure out where you're going to go. And I had no idea where this one was going to go when you started out. But there was this idea for people watching who maybe haven't had a chance to watch Sunday's message yet, that a lot of us live as containers, where when we're walking through crisis or we have this great need, we pray, Lord, please fill me up, please do a miracle. And then that happens, and then we kind of go along again until that next season comes up where there's that next crisis, but we're just kind of living as containers. You talked about Tupperware that's like, put away in the cabinet until you need it again. But what we're really invited into in this life to the fullest that we talk about having with Jesus through the power of the Holy Spirit is this conduit life. And I had no idea what a conduit was, to be totally honest, because that's not where my gift sets lie, anywhere near electricity. But you talked about a power strip, like a guy brought a power strip to the airport. And so instead of like taking one of the very few outlets, he created a space for lots of people to charge. And that was a very good illustration that stuck with people who can hear conduit and be like, oh yeah, I think it flows through you, but like really get it. How have you seen in seasons that you might have been living like a container, like how have you seen that difference when you plug into this real conduit type of living?
I'll let you guys, anybody want to go? Anything to add to that?
Oh man, there wasn't a first time, I'm not gonna lie.
For me personally, conduit living, I think, is optimal for the believer, right? Like if the picture of the faith is that we are to, and we talked about everybody shares the same purpose, right? To make disciples of all nations. That means that my life should be poured out in order to pour into others, that they would learn how to pour out into others, right? You see the multiplication of the church, this exponential growth within and expanding the kingdom of God when we choose collectively to utilize our giftings in line with the power of God to serve others, to be that conduit for others. And I think it bleeds into every aspect of our lives, right? Like when we consider joy, often we're considering joy for our own account. What would it look like to consider that joy is not just good for you, but others who recognize the joy that's in you and now are asking why they don't have the joy? We consider peace. I need peace in moments of turmoil. Amen. But what would it look like to consider that peace isn't just for you, but then that you can showcase that peace in others? Well, how do you live that type of conduit life? Well, you're peaceful in the way you navigate with people. You're joyful in the way that you do relationships, the way that you do business, the way that you communicate, the way that you live in community. So for me, that switch has been instrumental because I have found that we can become incredibly selfish in our faith. Faith becomes all about us. And not that God won't meet you in those places, because He's merciful and He does, but when it's optimal, when your faith becomes about others. I still remember, I have a good friend that was walking through my house and noticed on our wall that his name was listed. And just at that point kept a prayer wall with not a lot. I have my prayer list, she has her prayer list, but just like 6 or 7 families that we love and we believe are praying for us. And he noticed his name and he looked over at me and said, "Man, you're praying for me?" And my response quickly was, "Of course I am. You better be praying for me." And we joked about it and laughed, but he was overwhelmed by the thought, man, like you guys would spend focused time. You have this church, you have all this stuff going. Why would you, like, I know that from time to time, if you ask me to pray or if I ask you for prayer, you're going to pray, but like it's consistent. And my response at that moment and even since has been, I don't just put your name down there for you. I also put it down for me. It feeds my prayer life when I'm seeing God use these moments of prayer to kind of just showcase in other people's life His glory. And we're seeing miracles happen. And I'm like it empowers my prayer life because, again, it's not a container, it's a conduit.
I love that you mentioned that story because, like, literally to this day, like, I'll randomly think about that story. Because at the time, I didn't have, like, much of a prayer life at all. So when you said you aren't praying for me, 100% in the crowd, I was like, yikes, I've been praying for you, man.
Yeah.
So it was a super convicting moment. And I don't think it was until, honestly, fight camp where I was able to just like step into a new season of like, I mean, honestly, stepping into like that conduit lifestyle of just like pouring into others. I can't think of an exact day where like that switch just happened, but it was like over time, like just a desire to want to pour into people, to want to take what I'm learning in my personal time and tell others about it. Even how you said praying for other people is feeding your prayer life. Like I can say that's true for me. Prayer used to be like 5-10 minutes. If I needed something, if there was something I was struggling with, it was like perfect. Let me go pray. Now I'm spending focused time praying for my family and my friends, praying for the staff. Like there are tons of people I'm literally going out, and this is still like hard for me to do because I'm not accustomed to doing it, but like asking people what they need prayer for. Because it's easy when someone says, hey, can you pray for me? And it's like, yeah, I'll pray for you. Two days go by, and it's like, it's done now. But I can consistently pray for someone, and I'm checking in on that person, and I'm seeing how God's working in their life.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
That's cool.
I think that idea, what you talked about earlier, this intentionality will help me kind of make that switch, because like by nature, I'm just a very just a very giving person, very helpful, just try to be that person that brings other people together. But I think being intentional on praying and just giving that, like seeing how my faith can not just affect me or my immediate family, but then other people that can come around. I think that intentionality really is what can help then switch that. So it's not just, it just happens. It's happening because being intentional on bringing that to different places, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think John, you and I have talked about this recently, because this year, it almost started like at January 1st. I just felt like the Lord gave me a new anointing this year that's not like something else that has ever happened. And it's basically like either people that I haven't thought about in 30 years showing up, or total strangers that he just creates opportunity for me to share about him with them. And one of the things that's changed now that I've started to notice that is every morning I go out trusting that God plans to use me that day, and praying that he will give me that sensitivity to recognize when those opportunities come up. And that doesn't mean I talk to a stranger every day, because he can also use me here in this office and with my neighbors and that sort of thing. But I feel like that was kind of a switch to me to recognize, okay, God seems to be doing this, and now I want to lean in and be as available as possible, so that even when it's that, I'll just be walking down the road and someone will stop me and ask for directions, and somehow we end up talking about Jesus. Like it just seems to be happening more.
Yeah. The illustration that has messed me up to this, I'd heard years ago, and it's kind of set a tone for this type of conduit living, and it's the Dead Sea. If you consider how the Dead Sea works, the Dead Sea has little to no marine life whatsoever. And has
Is that why they call it the Dead Sea?
That's why they call it the Dead Sea.
Cool.
It has such a high concentration of salt that it's almost impossible for anything to live in it. And I mean, even to the point that people float, right? And so people are like, oh, well, the reason for it is it has gallons of fresh water turning into it every day, like thousands of gallons of fresh water coming in. There's no outlet. The Dead Sea feeds no other water system. So that water sits. And it's such a picture, like there's no real life around the Dead Sea. Like there's no vegetation that there's nothing that can benefit from what's happening on the inside. It's simply a container. You take other bodies of water that are very similar and you add outlets, and instantly life returns. The salt concentration dissolves because it's got places to go. There's life along the streams. It's feeding not just animals in the water, but animals outside the water. You're talking a very arid region. If there was proper channels out of the Dead Sea, that desert becomes a paradise. So again, it's not that it's not receiving fresh water, but it's not optimal for life. And I think that's where I'm trying to live my relationship with the Lord, where it's optimal for life. And that means I need to be a conduit and not a container.
Yeah. I feel like with a lot of people, the hesitation is that they know they're not perfect. So there's this idea of like, I know myself really well. That's a great idea. I can see how church staff and professional Christians, as I refer to us sometimes, like you guys might be able to do that, but like God can't possibly want me to be a conduit because he knows the mess of how I'm still a work in progress. And one of the things that I love so much, we joke that I'm not a big fan of Samson behind the scenes, but it's just, I am a fan of Samson. I just love the messiness of his story, and I never want to remove that or whitewash it because Samson made so many mistakes. And even at the end, when he called on God and God honored it, there was still a little bit of that like selfish motive that he's like, I want to get revenge on my eyes, but also like, God, I'm calling to you, and I know that I need you, and I know that I messed up. So just will you talk a little bit about what it looks like to fail, and I'm not meaning necessarily like a huge failure, but to fail at living out this strength, this conduit lifestyle, and then to keep going.
One of my favorite quotes that I actually brought up Sunday from Augustine, he says, in my deepest wounds, I saw your glory and it dazzled me. I think if power only funneled through perfect people, it would be unattainable for the imperfected, right? Like if God's power only showcased through perfected people,
Then that was just Jesus.
then it was just Jesus, right? I do think that even there, I just, the fact that Paul turns around and says, not just that he appreciates his weakness, he goes a step further and says, that's why I'm glad to boast about my weakness. Almost like he senses the glory of God that happens when he makes space, when that space is made. So no, to your point, it's not that we intentionally fail constantly. But when we do fail, it's a reminder that there's space being made for the power of God to step in. I often will also say that often in our failure, what we recognize is that we haven't been relying on the power of God. That for those who are really trying to live this life out, you know, Samson comes to that revelation where the power has left him. He never, I got to be careful how I say this, but when you read the story, he never asked for the power of God.
Right.
It just fell. It's in his weakness that he finally admits. And so, like, even that revenge for my eyes is an indication that he recognizes his weakness. I'm blind here. I'm bald here. There is no, although the scripture said that his hair started to grow a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's an indication here that I need you. Remember me? Is this picture that, like, this is my weakness I'm putting out in front of you. There is no way that this happens without you. So I do know from a practical way, I do think that where that weakness is, so we don't want to glorify the weakness itself, but we want to glorify the space that it creates. Right. So I do think that happens in a very personal, real way. Like I use Dom and Joey as examples. There'll be seasons where Dom will reach out and be like, hey, remember me in prayer for this. That's a way by which we're making space for the Spirit of God to step in that weakness. Where Joey will say, hey, remember me in prayer. This is where we're struggling. We're struggling with this thought, this idea, or we tried this thing and it didn't work, or I screwed up again. Remember me. I do the same thing with my friends. I do the same thing with mentors. I don't even think that circle needs to be wide. I think that circle needs to be small, but it does need to be brutally honest and confronting those facts without losing hope, and allowing again that space to be created, and then not projecting a sense that you got it all figured out. I've been told many times, and I don't know if it's because I fail so much, I've been told a bunch that one of the things that people have kind of responded to in the way that I communicate is a sense of vulnerability. It is one of the saddest compliments I get because, quite honestly, every communicator should be communicating a sense of vulnerability. Otherwise, be careful lest you would fall.
Yeah.
Right? Paul is really quick to be like, don't be that guy who's in love with your own press. Like, if the picture you project is this idea of perfection, I promise you the fall is coming. So I think there's a way of doing that without being without glorifying the fall, but then just making yourself presenting a sense of authenticity that people are really say, oh, well, if that guy can experience the power of God, so can I.
Yeah. So to kind of circle back at the very beginning, you mentioned that one of the things you've recognized is people tend to be weak. Like, I'm tired. That is something that's like, it's almost like a badge of honor. People are like, this is how tired I am. Well, this is how tired I am. do you think that exhaustion is coming from trying to live out of our own strength instead of out of the strength of the Lord? And follow up to that, because I think the answer to that is yes. How would you advise someone who's maybe watching right now, or they were here on Sunday, who is recognizing that that's where they are, how to step into a new season, a new reality of life with God?
I think it was just for me evaluating like all that I was trying to do and just taking a step back and looking like, okay, am I really just trying to take this all on my own? Because there was definitely a season. It was just I'm trying to do every little single thing and take it all on by myself. I think I almost felt a responsibility to like be there for every single person, and if something needed to be done, like okay, then I'm gonna be the one to do it then. And it was so mentally draining. It was almost no time. Like I remember it was a time I didn't even put much emphasis on being in the presence of the Lord, not much time reading. It was just such a draining season, and I was able to just take a step back and really reevaluate like my life and what I was doing. I guess it was almost like a recommitment to the Lord, just say like, hey, I need you. Like I cannot do this all on my own anymore. Like I need you to take control. And it's hard to do that. I always heard it growing up, like let Jesus take the wheel.
Yeah.
But even growing up,
Hate that song.
even growing up, like as funny as like the thought is in my head, like because I'm a visual person, like that's just what I envision. Like I can't do this anymore. I need you to just take this. I'm gonna trust you and I'm gonna follow you, and whatever doors you open, I'll be obedient to that.
I love that. Have you noticed a difference?
Oh, 100%. Every morning it was tough waking up. I mean, we were times we were talking and sleep was terrible. It was just I can't find the time to wake up, and even if I was getting to bed at a good time, it was just, dude, I'm so tired. I have the motivation to do nothing. Everything felt like a chore. I'm enjoying what I'm doing now. It's good.
That's awesome.
And it's not to put this out on the internet, but it's obvious in you.
Yeah.
I mean, when you love what's happening, when you love and see how what God is doing in you is affecting others, it's addicting. Like it's the thing you want to wake up to do. It's the thing, and it's available to every believer. It's not just to those who are quote unquote professional Christians.
Yeah.
Like, there's some men in our church who work in finance, and they feel that drive to help people steward their finances in a way that are better for them and their family. They see God all in and through that. They're being charged by that. And as men, there's a need that our work lines up with the purpose of the kingdom of God. And when that happens, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, one final question. How can the women in our community in particular pray for the men in our lives to be strong men? What are some specific things that you would say would be good things for us to pray?
I think Dom's disqualifying himself in his head from this conversation. It's like, there ain't no specific women except my mom, and she knows how to pray for me. I do think that if we collectively, if the women of this church would pray that men would find their alignment with the authority of God and find their place there. We talked a little bit about authority Sunday, specifically that authority that comes from full submission from that place that, you know, even when it comes to sins in their lives, Father, forgive me. That place of submission to His Word, submission and accountability to His people, like finding that place in community. If we can just, that would be my one, the first thing I would ask them to pray for. And then the second, again, there's such an attack on men living in the fullness of the power of God in their lives. It seems almost threatening in our current cultural climate, but that we would, that men would fall in love with sitting in the position that God has placed them in, and they would live fully in that power. I think that would be good.
That's awesome.
I feel like a good place would be just this idea that like connection is good. Like being soloed and siloed to yourself is a place that just there would be no growth. So like we did that weigh in on Saturday, and just seeing the guys there come and connect, just talking through things, just praying for them to realize that there is benefit in connecting to the other guys of the church in this area. So just pray for that type of continued connection to continue growing.
There's such a power in loud lobbies. There was a point where I was sitting in the lobby and literally having to scream over everybody else because there's such connectivity. it's 30 men, all from within our community. It was a powerful moment. There's not a lot of guys who get that. Yeah. And to your point, if we can make that a point of prayer, that connectivity keeps happening, I think it's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where are we going, Pastor Ashley?
Well, we're not exactly sure, Pastor John.
Well, we got. Where are we going in this series? I know we can approach it that way.
We literally don't know where we're going on Sunday quite yet, as
Well,
we record this on Monday.
Technically, we know where we're going. You're making it sound like we're not prepared. We know where we're
we know
going.
where-
We
we
just
don't
have
know
two
the
options
order.
right
We don't know
now.
the
We have
order
two
that we're
options
going.
right now.
So eventually, we will be talking about what it means to be a strong woman in a similar way. The Lord, like before I knew that this is where we were going with the series, I've been in the book of Joshua for a couple months now and really looking at this picture of who Rahab was and how she demonstrated a strength that you don't necessarily always expect. And so definitely going to be talking about that at some point in the next couple of weeks, but we're also going to be looking at what it means to be strong families. There's a lot more to come in this series. So sorry to poke back a little bit, but I was like, I don't actually know if we're going here on Sunday or in 2 weeks.
Well, I mean, we got some options. So
Yeah,
you
and we have a whiteboard full of them right now.
So just plan on being here for all these weeks because it's going to be incredible. We got a youth Sunday coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Father's Day's around the corner.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
There's a ton going on.
Yeah, so we will be at church regular Sunday, 9 and 11. If you are part of the Center City family, if you've been coming to Overtime Live, if you don't like watching us struggle through only questions that I came up with, you can still submit questions. So if you are watching on a Sunday, you're in the room, something comes up that you want us to talk about, that Overtime form is still available on the Center City Church app. And we would really love to hear your questions because even though you're not in the room for the summer, we want to be speaking to those things that you're worried about, those places where you feel the Lord inviting you to grow. So make sure you do that and watch us 11 o'clock on Sundays or show up live at 9 and 11. We can't wait to see you then.